Hey everyone, Wolf Lord Rho here. Today I review the Warhammer 40K novel Broken Crusade by author Steven B Fischer. Now I will be discussing themes and narratives of this story, but avoiding any major story spoilers. And as always, let's begin by checking out the synopsis off the back of the book. On the fringes of the Cicatrix Maledictum, the Black Templars of the Second Dorian Crusade tear through the void to join the Crusade fleet on the sands of Tempest, an ancient, storied shrine world. Assailed by the murderous warbands of the Blood God, the Crusaders come to burn the planet clean of the ruinous powers once and for all. But when a violent warp storm scatters the fleet, the dauntless Honor is left battered and alone in the void. Besieged by doubt, Castellan Emmerich and his brothers must cling to their faith and carve a way to Tempest. For it is there that their battles will truly begin, and the cost of victory may be more than even they are prepared to pay. Okay, so I read the hardback edition of this story as opposed to the audiobook, so I may pronounce some names differently to what you may have heard. The premise of this one is pretty straightforward. A Black Templar crusade on its way to a campaign. However, the way it goes about it makes it a far more interesting and less simple story, with, as the synopsis explains, having the dauntless Honor left behind and isolated. This one's very much a tale of two halves for me. The beginning, with the situation the Dauntless finds itself in, feels like a combination of adventure and mystery story. It has all the hallmarks of the dangers of warp travel within 40k, fluctuations with Gellerfields, fears of demonic incursion, struggles with navigators and astropathic choirs, all blended with being upon a Black Templar vessel, with the disdain and hatred for the mutant that they possess. And so we get some fascinating glimpses of how the Templars interact and deal with their own navigators and astropaths in these situations, the vying feelings of need and hatred against each other. Even the Templars' attitude to mortals is pretty legendary for being uncaring, far more cold than you'd get from, say, an Imperial fist. And we get the constant sights of that too here, the reminder that while the Templars worship the God Emperor, they don't exactly extend the same respect to his people. However, there's a bit of a contradiction with that here too, with the main protagonist and character of Castellan Emmerich, the commander of the Dauntless Honor. This is far more a caring Templar than you're really likely to see elsewhere. A bit like how by the end of Hell's Reach, Grimaldus has a newfound respect for mortal humans. You can't help but think Emmerich must have already undergone those challenges as well. And you get the sense he has, because Emmerich's a commander with a definite level of doubt within, concern his own efforts are not worthy, that he's not done enough to compare to those fallen before him, how after all this time he has still never heard the God Emperor. You can't help but feel he has a little more of the old Imperial fist nature still deep within, as he's not quite the zealous extremist that many of his brothers often are. However, that said, he's a pretty good main character to follow, contrasted by his men around him. The typical hot-headed Templar in Hadric, the wizened old chaplain in Dant, and your usual role fillers of apothecary, tech priest, etc. The main problem I have with this introduction and first half is that it sets up all these fantastic situations, but it then deals with them all really quickly. A ship losing its navigator, alone out in the void, is a major issue. A novel in itself. but unfortunately it's all dealt with really quickly. The same when the Dauntless encounters another vessel, seemingly lifeless within the void. It sets it up brilliantly, giving you a great sense of anticipation. The investigation and mystery of the Templars boarding and exploring. I mean, what a great image. Black Templars stalking the halls of an unknown vessel. And you do get that. But again, it all just feels wrapped up too quickly. That it's just stepping stones on the path to the Crusade, rather than the monumental issues and trials they could have been. Don't get me wrong here, it's all really enjoyable. But I just think this whole first half, the Dauntless' journey to get to Tempest, could have been an absolutely fantastic book in its own right, focusing on these events a little more. Instead, they're very enjoyable, but I don't think we get to appreciate them enough for the trials they are. Now, most of the book is told from Castellan Emeric's point of view, which is good, because if you know me, you know I hate jumping all over the place, moving from character to character. Here we get to see and understand Emeric's motivations, how he feels about events as they unfold, and why he makes the decisions he does. And we also get to see how he changes personally as it goes along too. He's a good main character. For side characters, we get occasional views from others as well, but the main one is a mere servant within the Templars' Apothecarian, named Lizel. You don't get to see or know her a great deal, but she works as a great mechanic for seeing the more normal Templar attitudes, that mortals are beneath them, barely ever acknowledged unless necessary. And I found the time seeing her journey as quite interesting, not feeling frustration at stepping away from the main plot as can sometimes be the case. Lizel's journey being one that kind of flows nicely alongside it. And we do also get a villain point of view from this one too. I didn't find it particularly memorable, but I didn't necessarily dislike it either. Not really anything in particular I feel the need to discuss. Now, as for the second half of this novel, the arrival and events of the Crusade, it feels like it strays more into Hell's Reach territory here, with Emeric being forced to use and galvanise the mortals around him, drastically limited on the Templars' resources. And so for me, this is why the story feels distinctly split into two separate halves. Again, it is very enjoyable. I enjoyed reading these events too. And it continues to deliver some interesting characters, namely a blind old missionary named Prosperine, who shows a tenacity and an inner strength that wins over even the Templars. It's an uphill struggle of holding out against the odds, delivering the damage to the enemy where they can, and fighting on until that inevitable death. Again, it really did remind me of Hell's Reach in its way, echoing a lot of the same hallmarks in its story. There are some undoubtedly epic moments here, a particular standout one for me with Chaplain Dant, who for me was definitely one of the best characters, one I would have liked to have seen more of. Now, is this one Hell's Reach? No, of course not. But that doesn't mean it's not a great story. Because it is. I read it all in a day, and I absolutely wouldn't have been able to do that if I wasn't enjoying it. As a standalone Black Templar adventure, there's not much more you could ask for. It gives you mystery, suspense, and action. Dramatic climactic stands against the odds. Emeric's a good character to follow along, and it certainly doesn't let up, keeping the pace moving on throughout, flowing along nicely. Score-wise, if that first half journey was fleshed out and expanded into its own novel, a struggle for survival amid the void, I think I would have been tempted for a 5 out of 5 Blessed by the Emperor. Hopefully we get a full story like that one day, because I'd love to see the Black Templars in that situation some more. But as a whole on the story we have here, I think it's an easy 4 out of 5. A great read from beginning to end. One I thoroughly enjoyed. It's quite simply just a straight up standalone Templar action adventure. And what's not to love about that? But as always everyone, what do you think? A huge thank you to all my subscribers, your support truly means a lot to me, it really does. If you're new, please consider subscribing to help the channel grow. And if you enjoyed this particular vid, then why not drop a like on it too. But with that said, I am off. And I'll see you all again real soon.